Welcome to the Scott Holland podcast. Back here, don't call it a crossover with our good friend Ryan from GoCougars.com from the Talking About the Cougars podcast to talk about the delight that's been the 2023 Cougar football season. We are here in the open week. Note you will not hear bye week in this episode, other than
Thank you.
me stating that you will not hear bye week in this episode. I guess that was two
Thank
two
you.
two mentions of it, so kind of failing that front. But talking about 5 of the 12 games we've seen so far from Houston Cougar football, how it stacked up to what we thought it would be in the preseason, all of that fun stuff, kicking around some discussion topics. Ryan, how are you in the Saturday morning?
I'm great. You never even try to say my last name though.
Monceaux.
All right. You can cut that. Uh yeah, that's it.
There we go. Just like that's it. Just the joy that we're feeling right now talking about what should be like the most I would say notable Cougar football season since I was very young, and I guess you were slightly younger, and yet I don't think positivity is going to be an adjective that describes what we talk about this team.
Probably not. No.
Yeah, just
Is this going to the Patreon members or is this going to everyone?
a little. I was gonna say I haven't. I was gonna ask you how blue do you want to be about this season, because I had kind of designs for either, but I was gonna let the conversation dictate that, honestly. Edit this
So
out, Sam.
the bluer I am, the more towards paying members, or the
Yes.
bluer I am more to okay. So
Bluer or
if I'm bluer,
mhm.
then my Patreon goes to hearing me talk about how blue they are. I'm just looking for the
Correct.
circle of life here.
Yep,
Yeah.
you
Okay.
got it.
Well, let's go.
So I guess we'd start this out here. I want to. I guess we talked through the first 5 games of the season some, and like I said, I imagine the general tone of this isn't going to necessarily be all sunshine and positivity, but I guess I would challenge both of us with this one. What aspect of this team so far could be individual? It could be one unit's play, it could be a certain game. What has exceeded your expectations from this team so far? I had to think about this one a lot. I had to
Any
think about this one a
any
lot. That's why I put it at the top.
anytime a freshman comes in and contributes, that exceeds my expectations. So Parker Jenkins in the last two games exceeds my expectations. Um, Beating UTSA exceeded my expectations. I thought you'd lose that game. I didn't realize how bad a shape that Frank Harris was going to be in, nor how mediocre that team was going to end up. But that surprised me. And I'm thinking units tight ends have been pretty good. Didn't know what you were going to get after losing Christian Trahan. Um, and Sam Brown. Sam Brown has definitely been a surprise. Um, last year he was known for his off-field exploits in the Kansas game, after the Tulsa game,
Yep.
got suspended for the bowl game, and he recommitted himself. But you hear a lot of people say that. What does it mean? But he has been dialed in, and he has been uh, the one receiver that I would say is there every play. Manjack has had a good year. Um, but yeah, that's where I would be right now.
Yeah, with Jenkins. I mean, he was a good recruit. He was the level of recruit that UH football wasn't getting before the Big 12 move became official. So that Parker Jenkins has eventually turned into a contributor. It wouldn't surprise me if you told me that was going to happen in 2023, that you were going to, after these last 2 games, see a guy who I think is just far and away been your best running back that's hit the field the last 2 seasons, obviously excluding the season before McCaskill's freshman year. I don't know if I don't know if that was the level of immediate contribution I was expecting from Jenkins. Like, again, I don't think either of us are big recruiting followers here, but came in with a deserved reputation as a speedster, as a track guy, all that stuff. I didn't know if he was a guy who would come in and take the physical pounding that being a running back at this level demands of you, and I've been quite impressed. And Sam Brown as well. I think that's the bitch of it, that Sam Brown's improved as much as he has. Like if you had told me through 5 games, Sam Brown was going to have, what was it, 400 plus yard receiving performances in there, and not have it be some kind of like weird statistical fluke, I would have said, wow, this receiver group's going to be like one of the better ones in the Big 12, because that was probably your number 2 or 3 guy, depending on how much you expected Manjack to step in the role. And I would agree with you. I think he's had not spectacular, but good. I think we got to take it with the context that the guy hasn't still played a full college season yet. You got him part of the season last year, and played a cup of coffee his true freshman season at USC, but not really much there. So we're still talking about a guy kind of light on field experience. So yet it hasn't necessarily translated for the entire group. I mean, you have moments here and there. I mean, the first half versus Texas Tech was quite good passing wise, but you would have thought, okay, Sam Brown's going to improve this much that the receiver group and the offense as a whole would be so much better. And yet I don't think that's I don't think you or I would give the offense that level of glowing assessment to this point.
No. And I don't think Donovan Smith has been a problem. Like, he has not cost you games. The book on him coming in was dumb turnovers and just making plays that cost people or Tech games. And we haven't seen that. And I don't think he's won you games, but I don't think he's cost you games either.
Yeah, I would
with Manjack,
that, yeah.
Manjack is a possession receiver to me, right? He's the guy to go get you a first down when you need it. And in that role, he's been very, very good. And, I would like to see him have a little more breakaway, but we'll see how that goes. Golden has to be better. And then Dalton Carnes has kind of been a revelation the last 2 weeks. Very happy for him and his story. I mean, he's a walk-on. And for him to have caught a touchdown in his red shirt freshman season is pretty impressive. First half of his red shirt season in a piece of a game where, I mean, it was in the first half. So it's not like, it's a fourth quarter kind of thing in a blowout. I mean, he's right there. So that was fun to see.
I rewatched the Carnes play when I was kind of reviewing the first and second half before we podcasted about it. And he beats a super senior who started for multiple years. Like, you watch that, like, this
blew
isn't
right
just
past him.
Blew right past. This isn't like he just happened to be lucky in the right play. No, he beats a 6th-year college player 1-on-1. Like, there's something there. I don't want to go too crazy about, nice performances against Sam and a nice touchdown catch against Texas Tech, but I mean, it's better than you would expect any walk-on to do at any point in their career.
And it was not a situation where Donovan Smith had to wait for him to get open. Donovan took 2 steps back and threw it, knowing that Carnes was just going to go right by the guy. So, I mean, there are times when a receiver, you have to give him time to get a separation. Well, they didn't give him time. And so that shows me a little bit more.
Yeah, it was a good throw by Smith too. I think this is the second best thing of the two. I think Carnes' biggest man was a little bit better, but like, good throw by Smith there too. Carnes didn't have to wait on the ball. And I think maybe that's made some of the things that have been so maddening about the offense, it's magnified it, because you have seen good stuff from Smith. And I think you and I both separately like broken down this offense's bizarre 4th down woes. And it's just so striking to look at all these attempts, have a number of them be short yardage, and not fucking once has Donovan Smith they thought, let's use the guy who Texas Tech basically used largely as a short yardage goal line and short yardage down and distance guy. And is just proven to be good at that, and was having his best. I mean, go back to the most recent game, was having his best running game as a Cougar, best game probably period, if you look at how good he was in the first half, but was running the ball well and didn't seem to be hurt or anything like that. And just, you're down 2 scores and just incredibly critical 4th and less than a yard to go in Texas Tech territory. And it, I think I said in the last show, I would love the football geniuses on the staff to sit down and explain to me why Tony Mathis between the tackles is a better play there than Donovan Smith, the 6'5", 2. I'm not even saying like to do, I think it would be smart for them to adjust to the new rule and, use the quarterback sneak in the way a lot of programs have. But even failing that, like find some other creative way to get Donovan Smith the ball with a yard to get. The guy's proven to be quite good at it. It just, what's the disconnect there? Like what? Yeah,
Well,
I just can't get it.
I have a creative play to suggest. And write this down, Dana. Put the 6'5" guy under center. Not 5 yards back. Not handing off 5 yards back. Put him under center. You put Clayton Tune under center on every fourth down, basically. I mean, unless he's, it's 4th and 6 and he's throwing it. Clayton Tune ran for a lot of first downs on 3rd and 4th down and won. Why isn't that happening? You've had at least 4 4th and 1 or 4th and 1.5, maybe 2. And you haven't put Donovan, the one play Donovan has been under center the entire year was clocking it before the half of the Tech game. And that's the only time. And it's fine. You want to run your offense from the shotgun. And if you go up to the line with the quarterback under center, they're going to know what you're doing. But that should not matter. It's 1 yard. It's half a yard in most instances. So go get it.
And you can essentially do the push. Like, obviously, yes, like you said, you, I guess, could be telegraphing it. Hey, if you're lying under center, like, UH is going to do this. But I mean, and you said it, like Clayton Tune conservatively, what, like 30 pounds less, 2 or 3 inches shorter than Donovan Smith?
2
like,
inches shorter.
Why were you not afraid to do that? And a guy with injury history too. Like, I remember we had our tech guest on. He was just like, man, we missed Donovan Smith if nothing else because the guy never seemed to get hurt, and all of our other quarterbacks are just like perpetually on the verge of being out 4 to 6 weeks. Like,
yeah,
big guy, knows how to run, doesn't get hurt, and yet we're almost halfway through the season. You haven't even tried to use him on 4th down when you've clearly had a problem with it. Like, you only converted 4th down successfully against one of your 5 opponents. That's just, I don't want to belabor the point here, but it's insane. And you're yeah.
As you pointed out on Twitter, that you really only did it in one drive of one game of a season.
Just,
so
I don't get it. You're paying a premium for this coach, not for his ability to work a room, not for his recruiting per se. You're doing it for offensive acumen, and the offensive acumen seems to be very hit or miss. So while I'm in that happy state of mind, one of the things I thought about a lot when I was in person at the TCU game and just kind of watching this closing stages of that blowout loss, and I kind of had the same thoughts when I was like watching the late stages of the collapse to Tech, is how do you ever get this fan base bought in and excited about Daniel Holgorsen-led football again? I mean, are there any realistic scenario out there where that happens?
Well, the word realistic is where we have a problem.
Yeah.
So a 30-point win over number 2 Texas would be something.
Wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. But other than that, even in the 12-win season, after Texas Tech, it always felt like you were one loss from everything falling out. And you didn't have great attendance that season, you know? I mean, it was high 20s. And I think had they lost one of those close games, SMU, East Carolina, even they were down Temple that year in the 4th quarter. If you lose one of those games, it just falls out and people just. So I don't know that he is on the verge of losing his job. I just can't make myself believe that. I can't. What I've seen with the administration and what they've done with other coaches that make way less money and have way less years guaranteed, they're not willing to pull the trigger to go find somebody else. And there could be a million reasons why, but the fact remains is there's a struggle there. And so, you have to assume, barring no Big 12 wins, that he's going to be here again next year.
And I really, I've kind of thought about it, like, okay, maybe this team comes out of this open week a bit better, and we somehow see this team gain to 6 wins. I don't see myself being able to talk a large number of U of H fans, even though I think a 6-win season for, going into a new league where U of H is. Any of you told me in the preseason 6 wins, I would have been reasonably happy with that. Just given, I think, given even with a lot of the Big 12 outside the two SEC departing schools struggling, I mean, it's still a higher weight class. You still don't have like Charlotte on the schedule or ECU when they're really bad. Like it's still a tougher league week in, week out. But even then, even if this team somehow got bowl eligible in its first year, which by I think any metrics, a good season in a first league in the Power Five, I just think I think so many people are just so checked out on this coach. I think that's at least somewhat this coach's fault, that it just hasn't really didn't. I think you pointed us out over the summer, really didn't try to engage with the fan base until some kind of half-hearted attempts, including talking with
Going yell.
Talking. Sure, he was. We'll say he was very kind with his time, with us, and I thought gave some interesting answers, but like didn't really seem to try to engage the fan base before then. And I think it's so tough to square that years ago, Dana Holgorsen was responsible for two of the more exciting U of H offenses I've watched this century. And now for the 5th season here, I think save for points last year when they realized like they had to damn the torpedoes and just throw the ball most downs, which kind of a quick aside, this isn't us complaining about the 2022 season, it's us complaining about the 2023 season. Like it's such an insane decision to think that you could be a 50-50 balanced team with Brandon Campbell and Tajon Henry being your lead backs, that you didn't realize when you had Clayton Tune and Tank Dell that maybe you should be an offense that probably throws to set up the run. But again, we'll just set that insanity aside and talk about the current season's insanity. I think to get to the other side of the ball that I think we notably have not talked about very much, what scares me so much is how few individuals have stood out for me. When I started thinking about this episode and I thought about the Cougar defense, like who's done some notable stuff this year? I mean, Malik Fleming had that great game against UTSA. Isaiah Johnson's forced a few turnovers. Nelson Caesar, I think if my math is right, is on pace for like low double-digit sacks. Yeah. But I mean, who else has stood out? I mean, I don't know. For me, it's not been many guys. And I was thinking pre-episode I'd ask you what issues are terminal with this defense. That might chew up most of the episode. What issues do you think at this point are even fixable with what we've seen through 5 games of this Cougar defense?
So you have not been great in the middle of the line. And that is, you can largely put it on injuries and suspensions on Chidozie and Jeremy. Yeah. And Hakeem is a nice player, Ajijalea, I think. He's a nice player, but I mean, he can't be the number one option, not right now. And Nelson Caesar doesn't really have someone else helping him on from the other edge or from the nose or D tackle spots. Last year, you had DeAnthony Jones, who was a force in pass rush, helping Nelson Caesar from the other side. And they made it work that way. DeAnthony was even better 2 years ago. So you just don't have that. And, last year you lost some guys up front, Derek Parrish being like the number one guy, and you struggled. And right now you are struggling against the run. And I think Tramarcus Cheeks has had a really rough year at linebacker. And now they're moving people around. Hassan Hippolyte kind of moving back into the defensive backfield some. I mean, you can call it linebacker. You can call it like a nickel back. It's a little different, but pretty much the same. And so I just don't think – it feels like you're on the field with 9.5 guys. And when a guy can come from the FCS level and look like your best defensive back, I don't know if it's troubling, but it's strange.
It's notable.
And yeah, right. And so, okay. And I mean, he's a good player. and I'm not taking anything away from Isaiah Hamilton. He's a good player. He kind of got lost with COVID and everything, and he came at a channel view, and just somebody missed him recruiting wise, and so he should be at the FBS level, but he's basically a freshman at the FBS level. And so I feel like the guys that you had named from this defense, Chidozie and Hippolyte, really haven't played the way that you kind of expected them to.
Another guy I would note there, David Gwebu from Oklahoma. I feel like you brought him in, and I think from what I remember, it was he played in the middle last year at Oklahoma, and it was just like, yeah, it didn't go great, but the staff thinks he's going to be a better fit rushing the passer, and have him maybe occupy that D'Anthony Jones role, because like you said, he was such a critical part the last 2 years, and just as much as last year's defense wasn't great, and they did have some clunkers against the run, like they were still, if you put him against a decent rushing offense, there was at least a prayer that they could stop it. Whereas I think just the pass defense last year, it was just pretty far gone by the middle and latter stages of the season. And now I think you've upgraded the pass defense a little bit just by virtue of Isaiah Hamilton, who you mentioned. I think Malik Fleming at times, but God, yeah, the run defense. I mean, your two projected starters there were, I mean, an FCS transfer, Tremarcus Cheeks, who you mentioned, and a guy who came in as I think he'd been a backup at UNC and a JUCO guy, Malik Robinson, who hasn't really ever, that was kind of sold as like, oh, well, we lost him early in the season. It's great to have him back. And it's just like, well, and one of those things that was really great about the defense 2 years ago, and I think frustratingly he had a poor last season on campus, Donovan Mutin was a big part of that really good run defense 2 seasons ago. And you don't really have a guy right now who you think could even develop into what upperclassman Donovan Mutin was, which isn't great because you're in a much tougher league than the defense that Donovan Mutin was facing. I mean, I was willing to excuse it the first couple seasons. I mean, you looked at it and just the Applewhite and Herman staffs collectively just didn't leave much in the way of Division I talent on that side of the ball. And some, I think cornerback, I don't think they even left like a Division I body there. I think if memory serves, they were they were counting on Demarion Williams and that UCLA transfer who never got healthy to be your starting quarterbacks. That's not great.
He never got on the field.
Colin Samuel. I was trying to remember his name. Colin Samuel. Don't know where the recesses of my mind to pull that out.
He got like 9 medical red shirts in a row, I think, and he's in his mid-40s now. I was looking at, speaking of Herman and Major and Dana's first year, I was looking at something from that year, and Dixie Wooten was playing on the offensive line.
Yeah,
and
right.
He was one of the worst offensive linemen I've seen. Good guy, nice guy, but yeah, so there have been some holes, but there's never been a better time than right now to go fill those holes. And U of H pretty much struck out in the places they needed to get bodies. You get a guy from FIU on the offensive line. You get a guy from Louisiana Monroe on the offensive line.
The Warhawks.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know.
And in the preseason,
and the guy you got from UT hasn't even he hasn't come close to the field.
Yeah, and the other, and I wouldn't say he's been bad, but the other UT guy, actually, someone I thought who could be like, I think last year when Tyler Johnson took over a guard, like I think he graded out last year as your best guard, which I mean, none of your guards graded out especially well, but you thought, okay, well, this is this guy's first year seeing extended Division I action, conceivably things could get better, but they really haven't. And Dana was so adamant that, oh no, we got who we want on the offensive line. We have a Big 12 offensive line. I don't know if I'm quoting him verbatim here, but I believe he said something to that effect in front of you guys. And that, I think you're actually segueing nicely into something I wanted to ask you, maybe a little more meta. I will say personally, every Monday at work at 9 a.m., I kind of hit my first like lull in the day, because I usually go in around quarter till 7 o'clock. And I start seeing the tweets from you and Andy and Starnes and Duarte from Dana's media availability. So suffice to say, you get to hear the guy talk in that setting quite often. And I'm just dying to know, why the fuck do you think he keeps saying contradictory stuff like this all the time? Like, oh, I have a Big 12 offensive line here, and then sadly grumbling after losing by 20 plus TCU and Tech. Well, we got to build up Big 12 depth, because I feel like coaches have an end game usually in this situation. Whether the end game is just like provide as little information to grade these people as much as possible, kind of the Nick Saban school, or send message. I feel like there's some kind of coherent plan here, and I just wonder just why Dana comes up here and says, "Oh, we're expected to be this thing," and then talks about the expectations put upon us. Says we have a roster. I think he said on our show 75% recruited for the Big 12, and then talking about how well we don't have Big 12 depth in the same breath almost weeks later. So I mean, what do you think his end game is here with all this, or does he have one?
My thought on his end game always is to do the minimum press availability and leave. And the minimum is 15 minutes is what ESPN wants. If you go and look, just this week was looking at Texas Tech, and Joey McGuire does an hour in that same setting. And then all of assistant coaches do between 10 and 30 minutes. And it's like, oh. And I'm not criticizing what they give us. I'm saying this is what he does. He does basically the minimum. And he's not saying a lot in that situation anyways. And there's 4 or 5 of us there most weeks. And I don't ask Dana a lot of questions because I know I'm not going to get an answer that's worth trying to get out of him. And I'll tell you what I have enjoyed more than that is Tuesdays, we get to ask for certain players. And we have gotten incredibly lucky so far this year with guys who it's basically just me and Duarte and sometimes Starnes Leland from the Cougar on Tuesdays. And we're in the Carl Lewis Auditorium and there's no cameras. And so the players feel a little more comfortable than they do in the post game where there's cameras and reporters and they've just finished playing a game. So on Tuesdays, they just talk and we get to know them and really dive into topics or areas of their lives. And that is the most fun I've had football wise in 6 or 7 years. We do that with basketball twice a week, but to get it with football this one time a week is a big deal.
Yeah, it's good. I've enjoyed the stuff.
Did I answer any of your questions?
No, but I mean, you did. No, I was gonna say you did. Like, I think I agree. Like, it seems to want to do the absolute minimum here, and I don't. And I would just add, I don't think he especially. I don't think if anyone is least bothered by what he says that's contradictory, it's Dana. Like, Dana doesn't give a shit that he said that, oh, this is a great Big 12 offensive line. Then 4 weeks later, how we don't have the depth to compete with middle of the Big 12 team. Couldn't be bothered less by it. Just like couldn't be bothered less. But I mean, or I guess he puts out that facade. I think you and I have talked about this before. Like, he talks about why I feel secure and then like constantly references perceived media slights against him. But I think he at least wants to put that public persona out there.
He definitely hears the slights. He never hears when he's praised or anything is said good about him. But yeah.
But I would just add also the stuff that you've done with like Jamal Morris in particular. I thought it's really good. It's some of the best player content from that program.
I love that guy.
I think honestly that I've seen period. So no, I think it gives us a chance to like mention that briefly. If you haven't read it already, go over to GoCougs.com where Ryan's done some really cool stuff with Jamal, who I think has been, I think as forthcoming as any athlete I've seen in the U of H space about like the struggles that they all deal with. And, this stuff that like, the bad on-field play stuff gets criticized, how that really affects like, these aren't just robots in those uniforms out there. So no, I thought that was really good.
There's a lot more of that coming too. I'm going to stop you and I'm going to talk about this.
Yeah, do it.
We are working with players who eventually it's going to turn into content in mental health spaces like dealing with social media and dealing with fans, but also gamblers who had put money on a game, um, dealing with all of the pressures of being the man, coming from a high school program where you are the man to a place where you're sitting on the bench. I mean, that's a huge mental thing. Jamal told me this, and somebody else, Malik Robinson, told me this, that, when they're not playing, people are calling saying, "Where are you? Why aren't you on the field? Why aren't you starting?" And it wears on them. And the pressures and the discipline you have to have with your time. Uh, I am fascinated. These guys live this life of it's 5 minutes here and then 10 minutes here and then 5 minutes here, and I can study for 20 minutes. And it's so regimented. And then when you get them out of that, there is no regimentation at all. It's just totally seat in my pants. Um, Dealing with players outside of the structure is fascinating. But there are OCD parts that they have taken from sports, and we're dealing with a couple right now. The practice pressures they put on themselves, and it's so interesting that athletes have these different. I mean, they're dealing with the same things everyone else is, but they're dealing with them in very specific athletics focused or related ways. And it's just so interesting to hear the parts of it that we don't hear. Like Jamal Moritz has a son. He just turned 1. His name is Jamason. Um, Jamason was conceived and he was born after Jamal had gotten to U of H, but he was conceived while he was at OU. And that was part of the issues he had there. And it's been part of the reason he's cleaned things up here at U of H and he's got a focus on. But now that guy has and I don't want to say this the wrong way, but he has a financial burden. He has a child that he has to take care of. It's not just my scholarship and my meal money and whatever. It's I have this child. So he needs NIL so they can help with this child. And he's not the only one. I mean, there's quite a few athletes that have children. And most of them, almost all of the ones that I've dealt with, want to be there. Jamal loves his kid. Like he is all in on Jamason. And I mean, it's so inspiring. And I hope that he gets the NIL work and the money and the help. And we're trying. And he's starting to have a really good year. He's getting starts. He is playing at Mike. And, I don't, as a media person, I don't root for teams or players, but I'm rooting for that kid.
Yeah, because as we all should. That's really cool stuff. And I think illustrating the really good things that NIL do, because I think you just see oh, like Quinn Ewers got an Aston Martin or something
Right.
like that. You don't see that stuff. You don't see the guy who can now be basically do something that I don't know if full-time job is the right word, because my full-time job doesn't regiment like 16 to 17 hours of my day like you
Right.
are if you're a college football player or college anything athlete. So to be able to do that and also provide for his son, like nothing cooler than that. The stuff that I think makes NIL really worth it, and any of the other effects of, oh, this athlete got something incredibly gaudy that maybe a 21-year-old shouldn't get, like still think it's worth it for those kind of guys to be able to provide for their kids.
Yeah. And I mean, when we've dealt with NIL situations, it wasn't here's enough money to go buy a car. It's here's enough money to take your girlfriend out to dinner at Chili's. We're not going crazy. Or last year, basketball players, their scholarships, and I think this is all athletes, they don't cover parking on campus. And so if you are lucky enough to have a car, if you've gotten a car via NIL, then there's this parking expense that is there. And it's like $800 a year because they're there year round. And, it was one of those things we wanted to help. Like, we can do that. We can figure this out. So
That's
It's
it. If you go into
it's
U of
not
H in
Quinn
any era,
Ewers.
yeah, parking's a nightmare too. Also, like
Right.
no matter if you're a graduate of 30 years ago or a graduate of 3 years ago.
Yeah. And it's uh, I have not dealt with a Quinn Ewers type situation from a U of H athlete. Um, I mean, you're talking. Well, I've seen reports where kids have made $5 for a social media post. $5. It's not even worth having a conversation for $5, but that was their NIL win was $5. And we have done things for 200 and 300 and $500, and then a couple things for a little more. And it's not the game changer that a lot of people think it is. And like Lincoln Cougs this week got a deal for all the quarterbacks for some supply company. And it's not a big deal, but it's something. And, good for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that can
I've
conclude the NIL portion.
I was gonna say the transition from like athletes happy good stuff to my next question, which is honestly, you have 7 remaining games here. Who is this team's first Big 12 win, in your opinion, looking at the rest of the schedule?
If you were to ask me this 8 days ago, I would say what you're going to say, West Virginia, right? But what you saw from U of H again, and what you've seen from West Virginia, I mean, they're in second place in this conference after the Red River rivalry today. They're in second place.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, they're only
Just
2
went
and
to
0.
Fort Worth, and made TCU look. Yeah, sorry.
And I mean, you saw it last night. We're taping this on Saturday, obviously. That Kansas State had to go on the road to a mediocre Oklahoma State team, and they couldn't do it. And going on the road and getting a win is a really big deal. And West Virginia winning at TCU, I think, kind of opened my eyes. And their defense is really good, and they can run the ball. Well, guess what? This team does not do well against a team that can run the ball and a team with a stout defense. And so I'm not thinking that's the win. I don't think Texas is the win. I don't think going to Kansas State is the win. Then you go to Baylor. Maybe, but do we even know what Baylor is? I mean, they showed you something in the fourth quarter a week ago that you hadn't seen all year. So are they the team you saw all year, or are they the team in the fourth quarter? I don't know. So I can't put that down. And then you get Cincinnati and Oklahoma State at home. It's got to be one of those to me. And I don't know which one I think is closer. I think Cincinnati has a lesser coach. Like if you just compare head coaches, right? I'd put Dana and Satterfield kind of right in that same area. I would put Gus Malzahn just a half step ahead, just because, and then I would put Gundy a half step ahead, but I wouldn't put them like several steps. I mean, even a guy like Venables and Sarkisian are probably not that much better, but they have way better talent. But with the teams that have like equal or similar talent, UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, you don't get BYU or Iowa State. But I really think if you don't beat one of by that point in the season, if you don't beat either of them, you're not winning the game. But I think that's your best bet. I think you're going to go over in October. It's only 3 games, but
I mean, it's funny. You are absolutely right. Like 8 or 9 days ago, if you had asked me this question, I wouldn't have been wildly confident about it, but I would have said, like, yeah, I think there's a chance for West Virginia. But like actually seeing Garrett Green, not just the fact they beat TCU, but Garrett Green, their regular starting quarterback, being back and healthy. I mean, I will say, like, this is going to be the worst passing attack U of H has seen outside of Sam Houston State this year. But I mean, their running game is so good. And as we've, I think, well established on this episode, this has not been a defense that's done very well defending against the run. That, I mean, It kind of doesn't matter. It didn't matter against TCU that Garrett Green completed less than half of his passes for, I think, under 100 yards because they ran the ball. So because CJ Donaldson is going to be able to get 4 to 7 yards, I think more carries than not against the middle of this defense, because Garrett Green is going to expose the fact that the back 7 or back 8 in U of H's defense usually doesn't like play assignment football very well, and probably get some big runs interspersed with some between the tackle stuff too. So it's hard. I think the exact scenario I predicted was us losing that game 35-20, and Neil Brown all shucksing his way through the post-game comments, which would just feel to me like being stabbed repeatedly in the stomach. I will say it would be very funny for Dana to beat West Virginia's first like pretty good looking post Dana team. But other than the reality of it being kind of a funny hypothetical to talk about, I don't think it's especially likely. And I mean, Cincinnati, I repeat the stuff about, like, I don't think Emory Jones can throw the ball very well, but like even with Emory Jones being a pretty bad passer, they ran the ball well against BYU. They even ran the ball well and little bits and pieces against Oklahoma, a genuinely good looking defense as well. Like, to talk yourself into U of H winning that one at home, you'd have to, I don't know, somehow figure out in the next month or so how to actually defend the run. And yeah, I think we like what like Jamal Morris has done. I think Traylon Payne, when he's come in there, has made some nice plays. He's a guy. I think I said earlier, there's no one, and I feel great about long term. I would sort of scratch. I think Traylon Payne could end up being a pretty good guy there, but still pretty young. You're still asking a lot of him as a true sophomore in that position there. But I mean, yeah, it's just hard to really, like, there's some games where you think, okay, like, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, like you said, you could talk yourself into it, but it's you could also see like, okay, well, but U of H hasn't been able to do this well. U of H hasn't defended the run, and just I don't think this team is going to go 0 for Big 12, but you start looking at the likeliest wins on there, and you still see how it won't happen, and it's not great. It's not great, Ryan. I thought this team would at least be good for 2 or 3 Big 12 wins, and the league is worse than we expected, and I'm still struggling to talk myself into those 2 or 3 wins.
Do you think Dana has any sentimentality about West Virginia and beating them?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, he was there for. I mean, you're at a job for the better part of a decade, and I think I don't know exactly how to describe it, but in some way, I think in some ways he feels like they were the messed up part. West Virginia fans are like, well, we told you this guy like is this. It's just like, buddy, I would give a couple of my fingernails for the kind of results you were getting. Like, you and I are sitting here, Ryan, trying to talk ourselves into 2 wins, and he was regularly winning somewhere between like 4 to 6 at West Virginia in some pretty good Big 12s. Like his last, like, what would you get to see a team like? I know they ended up kind of like trailing off the end of the season, not really contending the Big 12, but that last team he had there with Will Greer, like, I couldn't imagine U of H having a team that could go into DKR and beat them the way Dana's the last West Virginia team beat the Horns. That's what, like, we're not getting West Virginia era Dana Holgorsen results. We're getting like something magnitudes below that.
That's the game they went for 2.
Yep.
And got it. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't see Dana as being sentimental at all. I do see him having a little bit of spite and wanting to beat West Virginia.
That's sentimentality for Dana.
Yeah. And you know what? Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Have some spite. Get it done. I want to see this team play well. I want to see an offense put 4 quarters together. And I want to see a defense put 2 quarters together. I mean, besides, if you take out Sam Houston and the second half against Rice, when they were clearly not trying to score,
quick aside, that was about to be an all-time just choke job right there. The fact that U of H had a chance to even, like, if they had scored on one of those third quarter drives, like, all-time choke by Bloomgren there as a coach. Sorry.
Well, all you had to do was go for 2 at the end of the game, with 15 seconds to play.
Yeah.
Go for 2. And beat them. And I think Rice would have fired Bloomgren right then. And now he's probably going to get an extension.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they came out, and I'd never seen a Rice team like that, and was just shocked. And obviously the players were too. They weren't expecting that. They thought it was a walkover, and they could just look for the TCU. How, as a coach, you don't have your team more mentally there, especially after saying, what, we had our best Tuesday practice ever.
Best Tuesday practice ever.
Yeah, that was leading into Rice. And then, whoo, that is something I hope he knows not to say again.
I'm going to be thinking about that for like the next 10 or 15 years. Like, I know it. Like, just like this guy.
Best Tuesday practice.
Best Tuesday practice ever.
Yeah. And Tuesday's a big deal, you know. I mean, that's a big deal in the
it's their main contact day,
preparation.
Right?
Yeah. And so for him to say that and then to come out as dead as they did. But then the crazy thing, this is good, Dana, is he had his team ready for Texas Tech, or he had his offense ready. He didn't have his defense ready. And special teams got beat twice. And but he had his offense ready to play. And that's the first time this year, and maybe the first time in a year and a half that that's been the case. Maybe ECU. I don't remember the first drive or two. But
even ECU kind of felt more just like, it felt more fluky. Like watching that one back, I felt like ECU just missing
lost
guys.
Tulsa a week later, so
yeah, exactly. Like no, I mean Oregon, one of the teams I think, even acknowledging the Pac-12s, I think real how they kind of show themselves to be unable to compete, like ultimately the true top of the sport. I mean, that's still a top 10-ish team, and they scored 31 points the entire game against Texas Tech, and it's like, okay, wow, like this offense really moved the ball. Like that was a really good play out of the gate, and then just something happened at halftime, and you forgot Parker Jenkins as your best running. That and you were the one that like tipped me off to this. I think I read one of your immediate things after that Parker Jenkins, after the first couple plays of the third quarter, only got the ball, I think, one more time before garbage time. And it's just like, how do you do that? How do you, I mean, I don't think they should give Parker Jenkins the ball 30 times, but just even after the best half maybe of Dana Holgorsen football we've seen, you just still see so many baffling, hard to explain things in retrospect, beyond just the Tony Mathis delayed handoff from the shotgun up the middle on 4th and less than a yard, beyond the Parker Jenkins getting 3 touches before garbage time in the second half when he's been awesome in the first half. But I mean, there's something, the maddening thing is there's something there. There was something there that you just made Tech's defense look foolish in the first half. And just, I don't know, man, if that first 4-quarter game we see is West Virginia and we beat them, and it's very funny, and I won't forgive everything.
We're asking too much. 3-quarter game. Just give a 3-quarter game.
3-quarter game.
I could probably live with that.
Yeah. Keep it within 2 touchdowns against the Longhorns somehow, though I'm not like optimistic that's going to happen.
I think you should throw that out the window.
Yeah.
That's not a game you need to even worry about. I know it's a big deal, but if you're realistically, here's the thing: when you get to Oklahoma State and Cincinnati and Central Florida and Cincinnati and U of H will have all gone through this gauntlet of playing Big 12 bodies for 6 weeks. And somebody's going to have some major injuries. And so you're going to be playing those games. Maybe U of H is down this guy, and maybe they're down, Cincinnati's down a right tackle or a left tackle or quarterback or something. And it's going to look different than we think it's going to look right now. You're just not going to go through this league coming from the American to this and be ready for this gauntlet where U of H plays 7-8 conference games in a row. So my expectation is that something bad's going to happen. You're going to have some injuries. You're going to have injuries in a normal course of a year, but I think playing this style of football and against these better athletes is just probably going to happen more.
Yeah, that was something a lot of people who we've talked to who covered or fans of teams that have made that jump in the last like decade or so said, like, hey, like you are always going to have injuries during a football season, but your depth is never going to get more exposed from your previous league than it is now in this current one. Yeah, I think that's, so we're seeing November, and it's kind of I think an attrition thing with a lot of the opponents that you mentioned.
And I don't think this offensive line is very good at all, but you can't afford to lose any of them.
No. It's probably your best five. Like that's the thing. Like
Yeah.
that'd be the best, but I don't know if the backup five are any better.
Well, they shouldn't be.
I hope not. I
Uh,
mean,
yeah. So my expectations would drastically fall if one of your starting five offensive linemen uh, were out.
and if it's Paul or Freeman, I guess in that order, it's just it really,
Well,
really dial them back.
I like Tyler Johnson a good bit more than you, and I think he's your second best offensive lineman. I think it flows left to right. Actually, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and um, they did some things with Unige in the Tech game that I really liked. They had him pulling, and he's much better going and finding somebody to block over here rather than the guy straight up on him. And so when they did that, they had some success, but we'll see.
So I think on that happy note, Ryan, we'll end it. Can you tell the folks, unless you have some other floating 2023 football thoughts that you just have to say in a microphone right now, I was going to give you a chance to tell the folks where they can find you and what you do.
Hello, I'm Ryan from GoCougs.com. We have a website, we do video, we do audio, we have podcasts that are part of Dave Campbell's Texas Football Republic of Football Network. And we help out with any of the U of H guys that we can, Scott and Holman and Let's Rage Cougs, Chris Gardner at Houston Roundball Review, Parker Ainsworth at Locked On Cougs, just wherever. I like to be friendly and accessible and help. Not everybody's like that, but Go Cougs One at Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, but I don't really TikTok. Too old for that. And no, I don't really have a lot more football to talk about, I guess. What do you think's wrong with Matthew Golden?
I think it's just the challenge of being a number one receiver. That's a lot to ask a true sophomore. Like Tank Dell, I think had a promising first year on campus, but that was his third college season right there. Like he had played JUCO ball, he had played a little bit, I think a cup of coffee at FCS at Alabama A&M. I think like it's even a highly recruited guy like Matthew Golden. I mean, it's a tough transition. I'm weirdly not worried about it. Like I know it's been a rough start to the season, but I think by the end of this season, it's not going to be, I think his sophomore season is not going to be Tank Dell's final season on campus, but I think at the end of the year, Matthew Golden will be far, far, far down on any kind of list of worries individually or unit wise with this team. I just think it's a guy just trying to be the man. And that's a tough transition to do.
I think it's a little bit of a mindset in that he played second fiddle to Tank Dell and saw how many targets Tank Dell got. And he naturally thought, okay, that's what I'm going to get. Well, that's just not how it's going to be. It's a new quarterback, and they went to Tank. They had to go to Tank because that was the one guy you thought could get open and could make that catch. And it's just not that way now. And so I think he started putting pressure on himself, and Dana spent the summer saying, he's the man, he's the number one guy, he's the man. And I think that just all piles up. And he started putting pressure on himself, and then he dropped the ball, and that just spun on top of each other. Yeah. And so maybe this off week is beneficial to him. And hopefully he spent this time mainly getting his mind right. I don't think it's a physical thing. I think he has tried to run before he caught the ball. He's a one of these. And that's just not being completely dialed in and mentally focused. And once he gets there, I think he'll be fine. I also think that Dalton Carnes getting some of the throws that Matthew Golden expects might help too.
Yeah, and I think just Manjack having, I think, a promising start this season, Samuel Brown, like just all those guys, I think taking pressure off him will help as well. That if you're an opposing defense, you can't just park your best defensive back on Matthew Golden and expect U of H not to still be able to get, because I mean, he did very little in terms of output against Texas Tech, but I mean, you still had that monster half. So it's not like you could shut down Matthew Golden and by virtue of that shut down the UH passing attack. So I think that'll help him as well when they realize, you have a few targets there. So no, it's one of the few things that I'm like genuinely not worried about when it comes to and hopeful about it in terms of the long term.
Okay.
So I think that does it for us. Thanks to Ryan. Thanks to those of you that listen. Thanks to everyone who supports our show through Patreon, patreon.com/SH podcast. Thanks to our friends, Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, promo code SHP15. We will see you next week to preview West Virginia and talk about all other current Cougar happenings. So thank you for listening. As always, go Cougs.